Bob, you've had a lot of playoff experience. What have you learned over the years in terms of the difference between postseason and regular season, both maybe in terms of how you manage a game and also manage players and how different players handle these types of situations?
Yeah. I mean, obviously there's a little more urgency involved. Every game means that much more. The regular season you're built for 162. The postseason you're built for, in this case, 2 out of 3. So, moves probably come a little bit quicker. You're probably not as patient at points in time during the game, and you rely on your entire roster like you do during the course of the season, but there's certain guys that are probably a little bit more important, whether it's your starting pitchers or the guys that you rely on kind of more top to middle of the order.
But as far as your experience also dealing with players and understanding who your players are, you have a better sense now of like how different guys might respond in these types of situations?
Well, guys that have had experience, the guys that haven't, then you never really know. I mean, I think you get to know guys well enough to have an idea, but until you get put in, under the fire, it's a whole different deal here. But, you don't have to, inspire guys to get up for games that maybe you do during the course of the season at certain periods of time. You know that here every game, every inning, every at bat, there's that urgency to it. So I think that's what really makes postseason special.
You've had success against the Mets this season so far, 4-2. How much can you glean from that? And also, you have a much different roster than the last time.
Right. So we should feel good about that. It does not apply, in the series. So. I think all that's thrown out the window. Like you said, we have a little different roster composition here, too. Some of these guys weren't here when we played them earlier in the season. And, once you get to the postseason, teams are playing differently to get there. I think, in our case, you try to bring that momentum with you, but it's a different ballgame now.
Given what everyone's anticipating with the quality of the starting pitching, how important might bullpens be, the back end of bullpens here in the series?
No doubt, and I think our bullpen's been pitching pretty well here coming down the stretch. I think we've finally gotten to a point where we feel good about who goes where and when, especially with Josh at the back now. So, bullpens are extremely important. They're the ones that finish out the games. Very rarely do you see a complete game, let alone in the season, let alone during a postseason game. So our bullpen's going to be very important to us.
Go to Bryce Miller.
Bob, what's it like to, you did play for Buck and you're managing against him in the playoffs. Is it baseball's circle of life in some way, or what's that like to live those two relationships?
Yeah, I also played against him in Double-A, so we're not that far off in age. He was a really young manager when I played for him, and I was probably an older player at that point in time. But, it does come full circle. We played against each other, managed, he managed me, and I take a lot of what I do now was influenced by him, even though, he was a younger manager at the time. I've watched him very closely over the years. We've maintained a relationship, so it's pretty cool to be in this situation, yet once you get on the field and you're playing games, he's probably the last guy I'm thinking about. I'm trying to run my team the way I think is best suited, and he's going to be doing the same thing on his side.
You said you were influenced by him in what way?
He was the first manager that kind of explained to me why I was playing on a certain day. And I didn't get to play a ton, so it was important to me. And he let me prepare for a particular pitcher. So he would say, okay, you're playing on this day. It might have been 2 or 3 days before, and I was able to kind of visualize and prepare for it. And I appreciated that because as a bench player, especially back then, rosters were used a little bit differently. The bench players basically showed up, like a football player Sunday at 1. And, nowadays you're trying to get your role in bench players in there where they have the best chance to be successful.
Bob, can we get an update on Clev and Grisham?
Grish is here. I mean, he flew, I think, red-eye last night. He just had a family situation he was dealing with. And Clev has passed both tests, so he will be on his way, I think, later tonight on a red-eye as well.
What sort of decisions are you coming down to? 14, 12, which your pitchers
right.
You used, Manaea used Stammen quite a bit. Chris, Matt, where are you at
right.
with that?
Well, we're still making those decisions. We have some time. I think we're still probably leaning towards 14 position players, 12 pitchers, but who those guys are, not sure yet.
What would be the benefit of that 5-man bench? Because I know you haven't dug too deep into the bench that
right.
often this season. What are the benefits of it?
You know what, just maybe some, depending on, how the game goes, different variables late. if we do go with 3 catchers, you bring your second catcher in the game, you also have a third catcher there. If something happens, you're always kind of on pins and needles. So that potential could be there. We had trying to get a handle on a couple of guys who got a lot of at-bats, in the last few games to feel like maybe we were comfortable with them coming off the bench. So, those are the kind of things you're looking at.
Does Clevenger's kind of late travel and whatever, does that put his standing on this roster in any jeopardy? Or I know he probably wasn't necessarily going to start in the series anyway, but how does that affect things in terms of the
We're still trying to figure that one out, how much we used guys in the last couple of games. That's one thing about expanded rosters now. If in the past you were able to have multiple guys that, in the situation that we were in the last couple of days, you didn't have to lean on some of your key guys. So, it's a little different with 28, but we're still, trying to feel out and figure out, how guys felt that pitched the last couple of days.
Bob, you talked a lot about how much you've enjoyed getting to know Yu Darvish this year. I was wondering what it was like getting to manage against him, game plan against him in past years.
It was very difficult. I mean, it always has been because he has so many different pitches, even more so now. He never stops. He never says, okay, these are the pitches that I'm going to use and that I'm comfortable with and feel good about. He can do stuff on the fly. So, even at the end of the season here, he was working on a couple different type pitches because he was facing teams in our division, multiple times and wanted to give him different looks. I think he's very unique in that. Most guys kind of lean on certain pitches and try to, get your mechanics right where you don't have to think too much about that, but he's able to do things differently, invent new pitches, pitch differently from game to game. That comes with a lot of experiences and a lot of success.
Hey, Bob. Both you and Buck kind of represent my generation here, and both succeeded younger managers and have had more success. Do you see this series as a victory for fellow ARP people? And why is it, do you think, baseball may look at things differently than other parts of society when it comes to the youth-obsessed culture in our society?
Right. Well, I think it's changed here recently, in the last 3 or 4 years with guys like Dusty, too. You'll see some guys that have had quite a bit of experience. I think it's gotten to a point where the analytics and maybe newer managers that are more adjusted to that has gotten to a point where maybe experience plays too. So I think you're seeing some older managers hang around, some experienced managers coming back. They're still, I think, trying to find a balance between what's the best way to go about it as far as new age analysis and experience from the past.
Got time for one more over here on the left.
Your team has relatively few players who were drafted or originally signed by this organization. As a manager, when you're kind of pulling guys from so many different places, is that a different job for you to try and get them to gel when they haven't come up together and competed together as a unit?
It is, and being a new manager as well, so I'm part of that. There are a lot of guys that have not played together here. The one experience and good experience I can draw from was the 2001 Diamondback team, where that was an expansion team. It was a veteran club. Almost every one of those guys came from different organizations and had to kind of gel on the fly. So I think the one common denominator here with the guys that have been brought in is looking to win a world championship, and that kind of bonds everybody.